Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and get into it. First, just going to talk about what I'm kind of wanting to do with this stream. I'm going to try and start streaming. We'll see how that goes if I end up having the personality for it. But give me your Central Alabama minus top 10. I will give that to you later. But also, I don't like ranking doing rankings. I don't feel informed enough to do that, especially right now. Um, but So this is my stream. My name is Noah. My tag is Rex Caliber. People can call me whatever they want. Um, I'm going to be trying to do more of a variety stream instead of a Smash dedicated stream. I don't personally find many Smash streams entertaining. Um, and unless you're like a really high level player or a really entertaining individual, or you're a homie. Um, I don't feel like I'm good enough at the game to actually warrant streaming Smash outside of tournament organization talk. I'm also kind of wanting to fill a void that's in the general Smash community. I don't feel like tournament organization stuff. Not a ton of resources for it, especially videos. Um, to go over this kind of stuff, and so I'm hoping to fill a little bit of that void with these streams. Every Tuesdays, I'm gonna try and do some sort of tournament organization topic. I went ahead and chose seeding this time because I think that seeding is one of the most obvious things associated with tournament organizers, and is what probably one of the most integral parts of what a tournament organizer does the day of or the days leading up to a tournament. And it's also what the players most directly interact with, and so making players more informed on that is always a good thing. And then, for example, I think like next week I'm going to try and do a stream on what do I do leading up to a tournament, or I'm going to try and do how do I run brackets. A lot of people, like, I'm finicky about other people touching my brackets, but I want to explain my rationale behind it and why I'm a little bit more picky about how they're run. So that's possibly next week, and then on Thursday Thursdays I'm gonna try and do a variety stream. I want to do multiplayer games with non-Smash multiplayer games with random people in the community. I think I'm gonna try and talk Murph into doing some Bed Wars from Minecraft mini games. Might try and do some GeoGuessr or some chess with some other people, but we'll see. We'll see where I go with that. I do hope to upload all of the tournament organization talks to YouTube as a comprehensive just tournament organization guide at some point. That's why I'm recording now. Um, all of these streams, all of the people in chat, these are intended to be discussion based. These tournament organization talks are all. I want people to contribute because the purpose of these is threefold. One is to actually serve as a guide for beginner TOs because um, just limited resources out there, and I feel like I'm knowledgeable enough to impart something to new TOs. I also want to help give a bit of insight for players who don't understand what's going on behind the scenes of what tournament organizers are doing. Because I feel like there's often some disconnect there, and then that leads to miscommunications, and then misunderstandings on why we do things, which I just think that there's a gap there that can be filled. And then I also want to also have a general discussion about how can we as tournament organizers improve. That's the third reason I want to do these, and use it as a stepping stone. We can improve. We can discuss what works in our scenes, what doesn't work in others. But yeah, so please feel free to type in the chat. I may not get to the questions or anything in there immediately, but I'll definitely do my best to address everything. Um, for all I know, it's going to be slow going the first few weeks. Do want to say I am by zero stretch am I the best source of information on tournament organization. I'm simply trying to impart what I know towards the community, and make that knowledge known, or at least accessible for those who may not otherwise not know it. I've never run majors. Largest event I've ever run is 130 people, 8 pools, straight into a top 32 bracket. So I've no real experience with waves or large scale events. I've also never done a Wi-Fi tournament. A blessing to be sure. Um, but this is just what I've experienced through my offline events. So seeding. I wanted to start discussing seeding. Wanted that to be my first video, like I said earlier, because it's one of the most associated things with organizers, and it's. I think there's also a lot of miscommunication on like the choices that sometimes tournament organizers make, and I think that it would be good to provide some clarity for that. So real quick, starting off this, I'm gonna be very bare bones with these streams. I want this to dissect this to the even most basic foundational level. Um, so bear with me as I say things as much in detail as I possibly can, and also forgive me if I'm not eloquent enough to convey my point. If it takes me a few seconds to say what I'm trying to say. So what is seeding from a fundamental perspective? What is it? And I did, the thing that all the teachers ask their grade students to do, and like, what is the definition of this? Like, what does it mean to you? And so for me, seeding, as we will see here, to me, seeding is the manipulation of player positions in a bracket such that every single player in the bracket continues to fight increasingly difficult opponents as the bracket progresses. Um, Fortunately, bracket softwares like Challenge and Smash.gg are set up um, such that um, such that all that a tournament organizer needs to do is is rank their players according to their skill level in theory. Um, Forgive me, I'm reading off of an outline here. That, so basically, what this does is that it ensures that the best players are the ones who are earning money. Frankly, I think that should be the if there's money on the line, the players who earned it should be the ones who get it. Obviously, we've seen what happens when sometimes seeding goes wrong, or immense upsets happen, or a player has to drop out, and some 25th seed ends up making top 8 and getting money off of it. Um, so this, by this definition, this ensures that that does not happen. Additionally, as you continue to run events, as you progress in your tournament series, with your weeklies, with your monthlies, whatever else, I believe that this definition, the definition of seeding, expands into to add in this. That seeding should also provide players the opportunity to fight against a diverse range of players in a serious setting. Which means people who are traveling across states, across regional lines, that they actually have the opportunity to play against and experience play styles or characters that they otherwise would not gain without traveling. Um, the first is the core of tournaments. The second is more of something that you guys should be taken into account just for the benefit of your attendees. Yes, well, guys, you see when Noah sees me, he thinks, "Wow, that's most." Jesse, I will. I pray there never comes a day when I'm seeding your dumbass Yoshi first seed. I pray to this day that that does not happen. Um. Anyway, so this definition is the core of what I'm going to try and build off of in terms of why you seed and how you're going to go about in your process of seeding. So seeding, I've kind of talked about this, is one of the most obvious things that is associated with a tournament organizer. It's one of the you see them piddling away at a laptop for 20 minutes before a bracket, extremely stressed. It's because they're seeding. And the wacky part about seeding is that it's something that a tournament organizer does that can make or break a tournament for somebody. Some guy drives up an hour from, let's say, I live in Huntsville, so someone drives up from Middle Tennessee and they play and they drive an hour, but they end up fighting their homies and winners and losers and get knocked out. That ruins the tournament experience for them and makes them much less likely to come back. Um, Obviously. And what's worse is, on their hour and a half drive back, they have an entire car ride with all their homies to shit talk you and say why the tournament was bad and how that shouldn't have happened or whatever else. Because we've all been in those kinds of carpools before. Um, Another terrible thing about seeding, and or at least bad seeding, is that anyone from the top seed to the bottom can manage to complain and bitch about their seed. um, and that's whether or not they have a right to or not. From the top seeds saying that, oh, they were seeded 2 or 3 positions too high or too low, to the bottom seeds saying that they fought their homie or that they're like 12 seeds below where they're supposed to be. Um, Anyone has the ability to complain, see and complain about their seed. Which is why I think it's very important to have your reasonings pretty well set out beforehand. Um, what's worse is that it can be very, very difficult to break a reputation for bad seeding. This is actually super interesting. I'm actually really happy to hear that, Jesse. That's what this is all about. I'm going to get a lot more in depth, I'll tell you that right now. It can be very, very difficult to break a reputation um, for bad seeding, especially if it's like the first tournament that you've gone to and this is your first experience with the tournament organizer. Your first impressions are lasting impressions. They seed horribly, then you're going to remember that pretty blatantly for months to come, and possibly be dissuaded from coming back. And the worst part is that there's all this stress and all this buildup that's focused on seeding, yet typically, especially for on-site registration events, you typically only have like 20 minutes to seed the entire bracket. So for something so critical in which a lot of the event hinges off of, we managed to try and cram it all into a 15 to 30 minute span of time, which is kind of daunting to say the least. So that's kind of some of the importance of seeding. So I'm gonna try and cover seeding for 3 different categories of events. I'm gonna try and have an example bracket. I have an example 48-man bracket pulled up, as well as some pools from previous events I've run to try and discuss this. The 3 different categories of events that I'm really going to discuss are smaller non-PR'd events with no significant cash prize, so you're talking like $2 to $3 entry fee. Nothing. Most people are. Um, I'll get to that later, Jesse. I will get to that later. But I'll. That's actually one of the last points I end up making. Is pre-registration. But so 3 different categories. First one, small 12 to 48 man brackets is what you're probably looking at. For Alabama, these are weeklies. For other regions, these might be house tournaments or Smash Fest in general that you're running. Relatively low stress environments where PR is not considered, just less serious events. Um, the second category I'm going to try and cover are larger brackets where pools are unnecessary. So you're talking like 20 to 90-ish people. I think 90-ish is the upper limit for how far you can make a bracket before you start running pools. That's more of a personal preference, but anyway. These are PR level events. These are people are taking this seriously. Significant payouts, $5 to $10 entry fees, which can end up being $200 payouts. And then the third event I'm going to try and cover is events with pools, and for me, this is anything over 90 to 95 people. This is where I'm the least experienced. However, since the target audience for these videos is largely new TOs who are not at the point where they're running pooled events yet, I think it's alright that by then you'll have figured out your own rationale and understand seeding pretty appropriately by that point, but this can still serve as a talking point um, later on. So those are the events I'm going to cover. So now getting into what you actually need to do, I'm going to go ahead and say the very first thing that I think is critical for seeding is taking any amount of personal bias you have, um, any personal bias you have towards the players that you are seeding, and throw it out the window. There is no room for that when you're seeding a tournament at all, in my opinion. I think that this includes whether or not you think someone is better or worse than you really think than they really are, or whether or not you hate a person or not and want to seed them poorly because of it. I admit that I'm guilty of this. I've done it before. That like weeklies, I've definitely intentionally seeded people into fighting Chile, so that way they lose the round two. 16th seed is the key seed for fighting first seeds. But there's that's for weeklies, sure, whatever, But I there's no room to do that in larger events, monthlies or larger weeklies like Texas or California C. Um, so please keep that in mind whenever you're ranking your players. So there's an order of operations that I think should be strictly followed when it comes to seeding. Um, the first thing that you need to worry about, I'm going to go ahead and highlight all this, is player skill. This is the first thing that you need to consider when you're. This is also the thing that people most often associate seeding with, is ranking people according to their skill level, and that most directly coincides with the first half of the definition of seeding that I put up earlier. So player skill. Player skill is not. I have this in all caps on my notes. Player skill. A player's individual skill is not entirely based on their head-to-head with one or two other players. Um, you can base information off of how they do against one or two other players, but that is not strictly how good they are or why they should be seeded the way they are. Um, you have to consider things like, and this is going to seeding people based on player skill is going to be a subjective process to a certain extent. Because what do you as a tournament organizer, as a seeder, value the most? Do you value peak performances? Do you value their highest placings? Do you value their consistency? Who's better, the person who constantly makes seventh place, or the person who makes fifth or third every once in a while, but is routinely at like 13th? Um, PR rankings, how do you value that, especially across states? Um, these are all things that you have to take into consideration, and is going to be this. These are all of the things that basically coalesce into a player's skill. Um, so seeding people based on player skill, this can be very difficult for out of region players. Out of region players are they're unknowns. You may not know who they are or how good they are compared to your players. Um, but this seeding for out of region players, this is why PRs exist. Top 10 rankings, so that way you can get if you know somebody in a region, you can use their PR to base better or worse the other players in there that are traveling to your events. Um, this is strictly why I think PRs should exist. That's a whole other discussion. But seeding out of region players is why PRs exist and should be made accessible to your surrounding states. Um, Knowing your out of region players is also it's one of the reasons that I think that traveling is probably one of the most important aspects of being a good tournament organizer, is traveling to your surrounding regions. So for me in Huntsville, I've tried to travel to Middle Tennessee and Kentucky, Chattanooga, and bringing players from my scene with me, such that I can meet players from other regions, get to know them and their mid level, um, and I being it because and then also by bringing my own players, I get to see how they match up with the local players in a different scene. That way, whenever they come back uh, to our tournaments, I have a much better grasp of how to seed them. Traveling also is going to let you get to know the non-PR level players that are in a region. So your gatekeepers, people that are still worth seeding in your like 16 to 32 range, but aren't good enough to be on a PR, that aren't necessarily in your money. Um, so I think that seeding for skill, it's very important, clearly, and it matters a lot for determining who gets money. But I do think that seeding for skill matters substantially less as you continue to do it. Um, as many of the players on your lower half of the bracket are pretty much just as likely to lose to one player as they are to another. For example, the 58th seed is probably just as unlikely to beat the 35th seed as they are the 42nd. It's just there's clear gaps that if so long as you put a player in a relative range of range of seeds, you've pretty much done your job in terms of ranking for player skill. Um, so yeah, next order of operation that you should be looking for when you're seeding is regional conflicts. This is the one that I think is above and beyond the most important. Like, there's not a freaking question in my mind that regional conflicts are the most important thing to take into consideration when seeding. Um, but unfortunately, it's also the one that people don't see in the bracket. When you're looking at a bracket and you see all the little numbers next to people's names, you just take that as word of, okay, this player, the TO thinks this player is better than another. That's got to be it. That's must be the reason that he thinks that I'm the seventh seed and not the fifth seed or not the ninth seed or whatever else. When in reality, it's very possible that tournament organizer was attempting to remedy some regional conflicts that would have happened in the bracket. Um, so why do I think this is the most important? I think it is critical that someone should not drive over an hour just to play their homie or their carpool buddy or someone that they could otherwise play at their own locals, especially in winters. I'm going to talk about a little later about making sure that you know who is playing who in winters, and that you can avoid those conflicts. Um, but I genuinely think it's unacceptable to allow that to happen. Um, just because they've managed to travel an hour and a half only to get the exact same experience that they would have staying in their own scene and not making the hour and a half drive out. It is a time commitment and a money commitment for them to come out to your events. They should be getting a unique experience. Um, as you grow as a tournament organizer, you should 100% be capable of knowing who is playing who in a winner's bracket. Winner's bracket, frankly, one big simple math problem. It's not even hard math, it's freaking addition. Um, and of course, you're not going to know it right at the beginning, but as you continue to work with brackets, and even top players can attest, like high level players can attest to this, that knowing your seed means you should be able to know the other seeds that you are fighting. Um, and that's just going to be something that you have to learn. I'm gonna put that. There we go. So now talk about winner's bracket is just one big math problem. Loser's bracket is a lot more difficult to predict, for reasons I'll go into later. It's still possible to predict about half of loser's bracket though. And you can still, at least when you're looking at a bracket before it's being made, at least in challenge, you can tell who a person's first losers match is projected to be just by looking at a bracket. Um, so therefore, these conflicts in losers are, in theory, avoidable to a certain extent. Um, you cannot prevent. Let me stress this because this is sometimes difficult for players to grasp. It's impossible to prevent conflicts within your own city for larger events all the time. So it's just impossible. So for example, for my city, I run Huntsville tournaments. Let's say I have 80 people at my event. Guess what? 50 of them are going to be made up of Huntsville players, and it is impossible for a tournament organizer to distort a bracket in a way such that um, players will be fighting completely unique people all the time. You're gonna have to fight someone you play at your weekly. It's gonna happen. Just beat them. That's your solution to that. If you really want to get new experiences, travel. That's the beauty of traveling, in my opinion. Um, So when you are seeding for regional conflicts, mixing and matching seeds, distorting, it's not you're not going to be able to stick it such that everyone looks at like their skill level. But you should retain the seeds of those who are likely to make money as much as possible. I call them the money seeds, just for simplicity. Um, Retaining these seeds is critical because they're competing for a cash prize. When I say those who are likely to make money, I typically don't just mean so top eight's making money. I'm not just meaning the top eight seeds because upsets can happen. The upsets will happen. So for let's say your top four makes money, um, try to retain your top eight as much as possible, or top eight is paid out. Try to retain your top 16 as much as possible, or if you look at majors, where sometimes your freaking 25th or 49th seed will just bust out of the woodwork. Um, Basically, as a bracket grows, your money seeds are going to grow as well, and be mindful of that when you're trying to swap around things in a bracket. Um, do not start seeding for regional conflicts until you are finished seeding for player skill. Because I can look at a half complete bracket. Let's say I'm looking at the pre-registrants of a monthly tournament, and I see 60 people pre-registered, but another 30 are going to pre-register, or no, the 30 are going to sign up the day of. What's going to happen is if I try to account for regional conflicts and mess with player skill, that with only those 60, then when I introduce those other extra players, everyone's seed is going to shift up or down and all around a little bit, which is going to completely change who you play. So if you see, oh crap, the 16th and 17th seed of this incomplete bracket, they're both from Birmingham, and we can't let that happen. Um, make sure that you are finished with the bracket otherwise, because that is likely going to change. And that's something you see whenever you're making a bracket for a monthly and someone comes up to you and says, I played this guy round one and that's not supposed to happen. And it's like, I know, but I'm not done with the bracket yet. You've got to realize that. So this is all going to change because I know there are regional conflicts I have yet to account for. Um, so moving on, the third thing that I think is worth accounting for, but it's not. I don't think it's nearly as critical as the first two, is seeding for player matchups that happen often. So let's go here, player matchups. What I mean by this is seeding for people who fight each other often. This is Players should be able to experience a variety of player matchups after multiple trips to your event. This isn't preventable in all cases, like the top 2 or 3 seeds. They're gonna fight each other at the end of the bracket. That's gonna happen. They know that, you know that. Let it happen. But there are other seeds lower in the bracket who may play each other a ton, and you won't be able to account for all of those, unfortunately. Um, I, like, um, I know at one of my weeklies we have this guy named Xander who he was like, hey, and it was his very reasonable request. Is like, hey, can I not fight this person? This is the third time I fought him in 3 weeks. Um, is there any way that I can not play this person? Yes, you can accommodate those players. Um, if at all possible. It's not always possible because you'll forget about it or whatever else, but it's something that is worth keeping in mind just to enhance your player's experience. Um, so this problem, counting for player matchups, is it's much more prevalent at weeklies, where player growth is less likely to occur quickly, and where everybody's a regular. So weeklies, you have your usual crowd shuffle in. You've got your same 40 people who every week are on the grind and they're here to play. What ends up happening in these situations is that no one, I get to enjoy this a lot. it it happens, yeah. And that's something that, like, if you tell me, I'll try and keep in mind, but it's not something I can always just know off the top of my head. Um, that's one thing. So when you've got the same people coming into weeklies every single week, um, they're not all going to instantly grow or surpass each other or one another or drop in skill level a ton. Um, so they end up being the exact same seeds every week. I know for 4 or 5 weeks in a row, I accidentally had Strife, a local Huntsville player, as the 16th or 17th seed, playing into Chile every week. Because no one in the players between them grew or got worse or exceeded themselves in any way. So that was just how the seeds fell every single time. Um, but if people are willing to accept a lower seed, that means that we can change that and make that not happen as often. Never seen me to fight the same person twice because you don't enter Eric. Um, uh, yeah, I kind of bring up another point is that this seeding for player matchups is above and beyond one of the most difficult things to account for because you're not there, you're not the one playing the person, you don't know who plays against each other as often as the player does. Um, like, sorry guys, I don't know your exact player matchup history of every single back throw that you've ever done. That's not on me. But if you have somebody that you need to not play because you fought them almost every single week, let me or let your tournament organizer know, and in theory they should be able to accommodate you because I think that variation is important for a tournament experience. Um, so I'm going to explain the priority of basically these three order of operations for different types of events. Let's see here. So for smaller events, so for your weeklies or your house tournaments or whatever else, um, you're going to seed your money, um, probably your top 8 seeds or whatever else, and then do what you can for your player matchups. Account for it if you can. This is indeed the Rex Caliber blind Simba. It's so good to see you in the chat again. I'm here. I'm trying to give people the knowledge. We're doing our best. Also, Jesse, thank you for the follow, and M Spy, thank you for the follow. I did not see you guys follow a little earlier. I really appreciate that. I don't have notifications on. Um, so smaller events. This is where player matchups are going to be the most prevalent, as I said earlier, and your regional conflicts are going to effectively become homie conflicts, because in theory, you're all in the same region, so you don't want people playing their practice partners or their carpool buddies over and over again because they get hours of that on end, regardless. Um, so there are still sometimes you'll get a car load from, we've gotten car loads from Chattanooga for my weeklies, and I've just been like, what the hell, guys? But I have to make sure that I account to make sure that those 2 or 3 guys don't play each other in regional conflict settings. So then larger events, let's see here, we're going to, let's see, oh, this did not center, oh well. So monthlies or other, oh, here, that's because it's right here. So large events, monthlies, or other PR level events. Your player skill, you're gonna you should seed from bottom to top as accurately as you can for player skill. How deep do I go for conflicts? That's actually a great question. Um, that I actually will go ahead and explain now. So regional conflicts for winners, I will go all the way. All the way. I think that I think that it's up to the tournament organizer. But I think it going even as far as winter semis is reasonable for accounting for regional conflicts. Especially we had this issue a lot with monthlies for a little while where um, Birmingham and Huntsville. So for example, our top 4 for a little while was Chile, Maupin, Kip, Murph. Not effectively in that order, which meant that the first and fourth seed Chile and Murph would have to play, and then the second and third seed Kip and Maupin would have to play. as Huntsville and Birmingham players in winners semis. And while those guys effectively get to play each other constantly, so I have taken the initiative to, even in winners semis, to change that around such that Kip will fight Chili and Moppin will fight Murph, or some other amalgamation of that. And I still think that's reasonable to do, but definitely harder to justify. That especially is going to depend on the player skill level of those four players, specifically in winner semis. But I definitely think going as far as winners quarters is reasonable. Because that's your eight winners. We're gonna ignore that for now. Eight people in winners. I think there's still enough wiggle room to accommodate for those. Hope that answered your question. In losers, you're probably only going to get past the first two rounds. It's very difficult to account for losers, as I said that a little bit earlier, but and I'll go into a deeper explanation of that a little later. Um, let's see. So yeah, larger events, retain your money seeds, your top 16, top 32, whatever you're feeling, and then get those numbers, get your player skill seeds as accurate as you possibly can, and then move on to your regional conflicts. Because as I said earlier, that your regional conflicts may shift around by the addition of new players and shifting around of seeds. Player matchups, really, there's not enough time to accommodate a lot of player matchups for larger events. You're typically on a time crunch already, and you want to get people home as quickly as possible. Um, Bad players don't have feelings towards conflicts. um, don't get stuck on it. But yeah, player matchups in on at larger events should really just be an afterthought. If you can accommodate it, sure, but don't go out of your way to really stress that, especially when you have possibly another 70 people that you need to be getting the event going for. Um, so what else we've got? So now I'm going to go ahead and try and explain the math behind brackets. Do I have anything else on this document? I do. Let's see here. Turn off this. And we're going to pull up. Um, we're going to pull up Microsoft Excel. Favorite management software. So, this is going to be a bit of math, a lot of numbers. Hope you guys are ready for it. Basically, every single bracket is some bracket amount of a power of 2. So, 4th grade nerds, what's your powers of 2? 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64. 128, so on and so forth. Most important ones for smaller events is really 16, 30, 16, 32, and 64, which is what I'll talk about more here. Um, Basically, when you start a bracket, let's say you have a 32-man bracket. Let's see here. Um, in this 32-man bracket, in winners, what's going to happen is your top seed and your bottom seed are going to play against each other. And then your next to top seed and next to bottom seed will then play each other, and this will continue on until you get to the middle of your numbers. So first and 32nd, second and 31st, all the way down to 16th versus the 17th seeds. Um, so what's an easy way now this is something that you will need to learn and know just off the top of your head. Like I know that the 10th seed and the 23rd seed fight um, in any given bracket. And you should know that, oh yes, I have the 23rd seed here. The 10th seed is from his same region. I need to shift them around. And the way you can try and accommodate for this is if you know what round, so for each power of 2, add 1 to that. So we've got 16, 32, 64 here. 17, 33, and 65 is if you add 1 to all of those. If you take round 1 should add up to multiple max players. Yes. well, you can explain that here in a second. I'm gonna try and finish this thought. So you've got 17, 33, 65. Um, knowing your seed and subtracting that from these powers of 2 plus 1, you will get the seed that you fight. So, for example, 20th seed. 20 minus 33 is 13. The 20th seed will fight the 13th seed. If we go into our challenge bracket, let's see here. Um, am I fraudulent? Hold on. Yes, no, winner's side. That's what we're looking at. 10 and 23rd seed. Yeah. And then this works for every single power. So we're gonna, if we look at this, 12th, 12th and 19th seed, or 12th and 21st seed, I'm sorry. 12 plus 21 is 33. And then, so when that round happens, 1 through 32, your winners, in theory, are your 1st through 16th seed here. They will move on to through the winner's bracket, whereas the bottom half will move on to the loser's bracket. This top half of the bracket, this process then repeats for them. So, in your winner's top 16, you will have 1st seed fights the 16th seed, 2nd fights the 15th seed, and so on and so forth down to the 8th and 9th seed. Which we can see. So 11th seed fights the 6th seed, as it does in this challenge bracket here, 6th and 11th seed. So this is an easy way to just mentally calculate who is fighting who. And this goes all the way down to, you've got your other powers of 2, a 4th and 5th seed fight, 1 through 4, 2nd and 3rd, 1st and 4th seed fight. And that's winner's bracket. That's all it is. So when you have a top 32 bracket, even for large events, it should follow this this methodology, and you should be able to mentally know that when you're seeding your brackets. So losers brackets. Earlier, I said that this is much more difficult to calculate. So let's see what happens with that. We have, so our first through 1 through 16, our top half of the bracket moves on to winners, and then our 17 through 32nd seed move on to losers. These people that lose out of winners immediately play into what I call the off round, which is where they will be playing against, and so in this case, this is that losers round 2. 11th seed loses to the 6th seed and then immediately fights the 17th seed in this off round. The off round is a, at least for challenge, I think that Smash.gg follows a similar procedure. This off round is synthetically shuffled based on the size of your bracket, based on the power of 2 of your bracket. So I have this 32 man bracket, and then I have a 33rd man bracket. So there's only one additional person, so it's in the 32 to 63 range. And in this off round, the 11th seed should still... No, forgive me. 11th and 21st. Yeah. So in this off round, in the 33 to 64 range, the 11th seed will fight the 21st seed in this off round. However, as we can see in this 32-man bracket, the 11th seed instead fights the 17th seed. I've stared at these brackets for an hour and a half, trying to figure out the math behind it, and as far as I can tell, it's difficult enough to mentally calculate such that you will not be able to accommodate it when you're seeding. Unless you use Smash.gg using projected software, which is effectively cheating. Anyways, so this off round is why losers is hard to account for in terms of regional conflicts. However, there is this next round, which in this case is losers round 3, and also losers round 1 in this specific situation, where this is what I'm going to call the on round. In the on round, you have your 17 through 32nd seeds who are playing. The 17th seed, in a similar fashion, a winner's bracket, the 17th seed will fight the 32nd seed, the 18th will fight the 31st, and so on and so forth. And this gap, and this continues to close in on itself, um, down to the point where the 24th and 25th seed fight. Um, and we can see that in this bracket, 24th and 25th seed fight. We reduce this down to 9 through 16. Our 9th and 16th seeds will fight, and our 12th and 13th seeds will fight, which is here, 9th and 16th, and our 12th and 13th seeds will fight. And that is guaranteed for every single bracket. Including if we look at this top 48, or this 48-man bracket, we'll see here that still the 9th and 16th seeds fight, as well as the 12th and 13th, and so on and so forth. So in a sense, this is still replicable, and this is still understandable. However, it is more difficult to account for and to see than the winner's bracket. And typically, your winner's bracket players are the people who are traveling. Therefore, you want to accommodate those who are traveling a little bit more so than you do your local players. Um, anyway, so that's the math behind these brackets. So this kind of begs the question, what happens when you don't have a square number of 32 or 64? That's what a bye is. A bye is effectively just a blank slot that is inputted for your bottom seeds. So I have 27 people in my bracket. 28th through 32nd seed become byes. So we're going to put a yellow marker on them. This means that where the second seed would fight the 31st seed, they instead do not have to play anybody. Which, go over to this 48-man bracket. You can see that the first seed has a bye because there is no 64th seed. This also holds for losers, including in your off round. So there are going to be some players who just magically get a bye in losers because of the off round. And this reason is why I believe, it's not in this specific bracket, but this does happen. This is why I believe that going 0-2 or 1-2 or 2-2, or it's why I don't believe that matters. I believe that redemption brackets, which is what you typically need 0-2 and 1-2ers for, I believe that redemption brackets should be based off of placing. However, God forbid you have 30 to 40 people walking up to you and asking you what your placing is, when frankly that's the last thing that's on your mind. Please don't do that. Don't ask the tournament organizer their placing when they're trying to run bracket. You're not their priority at that moment. So yeah, this is why I don't believe that going 0-2 and 1-2 matter. I think you should be far more focused on your placing. And the reason that this off round exists is because you have to weed out even more losers than you do winners. So for every loser, every winner, every single winner's round, there are 2 losers rounds that take place, typically. So what this means is that wins and winners technically count as 2 wins and losers. But when I say I went 1-2, that doesn't reflect that. Or I went 2-2, that doesn't reflect that. I could have a higher placing than someone who also went 2-2 because I went farther in winners than I did in losers. So, moral of the story, going 1-2 and 0-2 doesn't matter. Throwing that out there. So now I want to talk about pools. So we're gonna go, hopefully you guys can see this. I also meant to do a scene transition, but oh well. I'll be alright. Yokel, thank you for the follow. I just now caught that, but I appreciate it, dude. So looking at pools, how does all this talk of regional conflicts and seeding translate to pools? So once you have seeded, for example, in this top 30, we're going to just look at this top 32 bracket. Once you have looked, seeded your top 32 or whatever bracket you're feeding into properly when it comes to pools, your main job from then on is to prevent regional conflicts, and that's swapping seeds of the same position with amongst other pools to assure that the skill level is still weighed appropriately amongst the different pools. Um, I personally don't know how difficult it is to accommodate regional conflicts for multiple waves of pools because I have never run an event of that size. Um, but Smash.gg, which is the only software you should be using if you're worrying about pools, um, you projected brackets are a thing. It is possible to account for this, assuming that seeds fall into play. Um, so we're gonna specifically look at Smash.gg. Um, this is melee. Smush singles. Um, if we look at a pool, Smash.gg conveniently, um, so we can see to the right here. Back in September when I seeded this event, um, how I seeded in terms of skill level. So at the top, Chili, Pip, those are seeds going top to bottom. Smash.gg appropriately puts them into their own pools and then shows the seed of the person relative to the rest of their pool. So, for example, in this first pool, we're going to zoom in on it. Um, oh, cool. This is not wanting to zoom. We have. Cool. Sunito as the first seed of the pool, Mag as the second, Match as the third, and Dog with Hips as the fourth seed. And what this means is that Sunito is the first seed of the tournament, Magnificent is the 16th seed of the tournament, Match is the 17th, and Dog with Hips is the 32nd seed. However, for their pool, they are the first, second, and third, and fourth seed. Similarly to how a normal bracket works, a pool, you will be playing against the seeds as though it's one small winners bracket, such that the first and eighth seed will still play, the fourth and fifth seed will still play, the 12th and fifth seed will still play. Um, Therefore, just by looking at this chunk right here, I can tell who is going to play who in winners bracket, and that is something that I think that pool captains should be, or at least seeders should be able to look at and be aware of. And we can see that in here where first is fighting the 32nd seed still, 16th is fighting 17th seed, who are the first, second, third, and fourth seeds of their respective pool. Um, so yeah, I'm a firm believer that if there are two people from the same region who are in a pool and they are not seeded to play in a pool, I still do not believe that they should be in the same pool. Um, because like even if the two people they're not projected to play, move them. Upsets are going to happen, and out of region players are most likely to make your upsets. And if an upset happens, then they may end up having to play, and that will still. Why be in that situation in the first place? Why take that chance? Um, go ahead and just um, and move them around. So, that's the discussion of pools. So time and pre-registration. I don't know if Jesse is still in here, but I'm going to start talking a little bit more about pre-registration now. You'll see I have this 15 and 25 minutes next to these events. Back on it, Jesse. So for day of sign-up events, seeding is going to take a little while. So all this shit that I've just explained, everything for the past like almost an hour. All of this happens within 30 to 40 minutes. Um, and this is why I firmly believe in your schedule for your event. Uh, why having an allotted time to seed is very important between when signups end and when your bracket starts. Because if a player is assuming that okay, signups end, the bracket is now going to start, they're going to be like, what the heck? Why is the tournament not started? Why am I waiting around? when it's because we have to seed, we have to do all of this stuff that we've discussed. Um, Shout out to everyone waiting till the event starts. God, dude, Chance, you fucking know it, dude. You know it. This is why I believe that having that a lot of time is very important. It wasn't until Smush started happening and we were running 80-man events that I was like, okay, I need to set aside 30-minute span of time, okay, to strictly to seed. Um, for smaller weekly events or non-PR'd events where people are just trying to get better. This should all this process should probably take you 15 minutes max. Is what I have here. Um, because typically in these smaller events, they're weekday events where you have limited time in your venue. So you should be prioritizing your time as opposed to working on your seating to make sure you're out at a reasonable time and not being an inconvenience for your venue. Larger the day of signups, larger day of signup events. So sometimes your cons is a big one. Your other PR level events that have large amounts of people. This should probably take 20 to 25 minutes. Um, of course, that's difficult to do based on all sorts of other problems, like people not registering immediately when they should or whatever else. Um, but this may even take longer for day of sign up events where you have pools, because then you have to accommodate your pool captains who are wanting to also. Um, I'm not. I'm not paying attention to that melee. So you have to accommodate pool captains that are also playing, and you typically need one pool captain per pool. Um, so you have to appropriately seed them into their own pools, which can take it's a lot more logistical work. It may take a little bit longer than you want it to for seeding. Um, so for timing purposes, this is why pre-registering is valuable, because we discuss these three different order of operations. Player skill, regional conflicts. Tournament organizers can account for player skill, or at least about 80 to 90% of it, um, all uh, all through pre-registration. And of course, there are going to be some people who still sign up the day of that is going to mess with regional conflicts, which is why you can only account for player skill. But this is why pre-registration is important, is because then you can just go ahead and rank everyone according to their skill level beforehand and not have to worry about. That'll be one less thing that the tournament organizer has to worry about the day of, or forgetting about you, or forgetting where you were seated, or something else. Um, I'm definitely a believer in, if someone questions their own or someone else's seed in an event, that you should have an answer for them, something to give them, even if it's like I didn't know how good they were at the game. Um, for example, I think one time Murph told me that I was like, why was this guy 15th seed over the 18th seed when he's not as good of a player? And I was able to tell him that it was because if he had stayed as the 18th or 17th seed or whatever else, that he would have ended up having to fight a certain other player in the bracket. And being able to know that and offer that explanation is very helpful for players that have no idea what else, that would have no idea had they not been seeding along with you. Please, for the love of God, always have someone check your seeding. Holy cow. Always have, just because there are going to be unknowns that you cannot account for. And I have this in all caps here. Always have someone check your seeding. You are not the end-all be-all on player knowledge, much as you would hate to admit it. That is just not you're not capable of that, unfortunately. Um, so what I typically try to do is have at least 1 to 2 people from other regions come to check out the seeding and just make sure that they believe their players are ranked appropriately. Have someone from exactly every city and every region at the very least check if at all possible. Um, Sometimes you may have somebody who's not as knowledgeable enough, but um, if that person is available, I think it's very important to have that. Um, Having it is in theory possible to have players at your event check check what seed they are, or not necessarily their seeding, but who they're playing to see who the if there are any regional conflicts. Jesse, I'll get to that in a minute. Like it's like, hey everybody, check your phone and tell me if you have any bracket problems. Problem with this is not always feasible to do because you will have 40 people all trying to check their phones while other 40 cannot access the internet or something else like that. Um, or and then once you do that, you're gonna have another 30 people walking up to you and being like, "Hey, my seed is fine," or "Hey, I don't like this seed. Why'd you do this?" So I think it's way more advisable to have people from region, just 1 to 2 people, or 3 or 4 people from regions checking the seeds. Um, and I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is just being able to sit down and own up to your own mistakes. Um, I've made seeding mistakes. I've accidentally seeded Tennessee players to fight each other, and Birmingham people to fight each other as the 5th and 12th seed, and I was like, I can't believe I've done this. But knowing that you've messed up and being able to admit that and admit that to the players who are suffering as a consequence, or not suffering as a strong word, but who are who they play as a consequence of your actions, being able to own up to that, I think is very important, and is always it's humbling to be able to admit that fault, and it makes you more human to your players, which is I always think is good. Also, be able to acknowledge that upsets are going to happen. Um, you may think you seeded someone far too low in terms of player skill, but in reality, upsets are going to happen, and upsets are a good thing because that means that if an upset has happened, that your players are growing in skill and as players, possibly as a result of your tournaments. Um, which are some of the hypest and most fun moments of all is whenever an amazing upset happens for somebody that's been playing their heart out and putting their time and effort into the game. Um, that's really all I have in terms of my content. I'm at the end of my outline for points to talk about. I want to look at Jesse's question. How does seeding work for newer players? Because I remember the first time I ever talked to you about seeding, the question was, hey, are you Jesse the pretty solid Yoshi player? And I didn't know how to tell you how good I was, so I just nodded. So, newer players, it's always hard. I'm actually really happy you think that, Kyle. I was kind of scared I was just gonna be preaching to the choir kind of information here, but really glad this was helpful. Um, New players, it's like you've got to go with your gut. If you know that they've competed, if you can ask them how they were relative to their region, if they've played before, how good were they? You can try and get some amount of basis off of that, but they might just run a freaking tear through your damn bracket, and there's not going to be anything you could have really done about that. Because that misstep in knowledge is just going to be, it's going to happen. Um, for you in particularly, I was like, how good do you think you are? Like, how one way you can judge it is uh, friendlies leading up to the event. I remember Dalian at one point told me that this Me Gunner main from New England was hella good when he was playing him in friendlies, so thankfully I didn't seed him last. And I was able to seed him a little bit higher. So you've got, for day of sign of events, you have the ability to accommodate for that. But for larger events, typically the people that you're going to want to watch out for and the people that are important to seed are players that are already well known or already on PRs, and you, in theory, have the ability to accommodate those players. Um, so, can you ask to DQ smelly people? No, Melee, you can't DQ smelly people. It's nearly impossible to seed a new player accurately. I 100% agree, Chance. Talk to people who played friendlies. Yeah, absolutely. Play them myself. That's a really good gauge. Um, I no, that's really good. Is just being able to base it off of, because and that's a reason I think that top players are excellent sources for seeding. Well, okay, they're often very good sources for asking help with seeding because they typically have the best gauge of how good a person is. I asked Chili to help out with back throw seeding every once in a while because he's actually there playing the players and getting to see their progression and their growth and knowing how good they are. Seeding is very hard melee. Thank you for being able to being able to admit that. I remember I got stuck going 0-2 because I kept getting seeded into PR players until I got 17 to blast off, and then my brackets were less harsh. Well, you see, and that's another thing that kind of happens. Let me get out of this Word doc, and we'll go into a seed and go into an example bracket. You're gonna see why that happens. So let's say you're what's a good example? Um, let's say let's say you're the 24th seed. Yeah, so right off the bat, your round one is the ninth seed, and that sucks. That's hard. Um, you're likely going to lose that because of that gap. Um, whereas now 24th seed, you now fight the 25th seed. It's a hard matchup. 14th seed, you are in theory supposed to lose that, and even if you do win it, you have to then fight the 11th seed, who's even harder. Um, and that's part of when you look at like this Excel sheet. Um, like let's say the 27th, like the 29th seed has to play the 4th seed in winners, and then what the who would they have to play in losers? They would have to play the fucking 20th seed, which in theory those are substantial gaps. Like I think the imagine being good, I know, right? I think the way brackets are meant to work is that you're supposed to win until you fight a more difficult seed in winners, and you're supposed to lose, and then you were supposed to win at the very most two more in losers. Um, exactly, Jesse. That's why, God forbid, you're a mid-level player. In Georgia is a really bad place to be a mid-level player. For example, what I was talking about earlier, you've got your 15, 7 seeds better saying. So they win until they fight a tough player in winners, until they fight a significantly better person. They go down here, and then they win one, and then they immediately lose. The 6th seed go until they fight a harder player in winners, and then they win two, and then they lose. And that's how brackets are designed to work, um, such that the stronger players are always cascading down from winners. Um, tough seeds in the middle in terms of bracket difficulty. Yeah. Tough being level, at least good to go 1, 3, 2, 4, 2. Yeah. I've gotten over caring about my seed, and I just working until I beat everyone, dog. Okay, honestly, like I'm sure you're memeing, but like working until you beat everybody, that's the best, in my opinion, that's the best mentality that you can have, as opposed to stressing over, oh, damn, I got ninth at this tournament again, or I got 13th at this, you did mean that? Okay, good. Um, oh, damn, I got ninth or 13th at this tournament again. Work till you get to the top. Work until you win the fucking tournament, work until you beat everybody, like you're saying. 25th for you is pretty even hard to seed. Yeah, like I was saying earlier that after a while the direct number that you seed someone matters way less the further down you go, and it's more about what tier of basically like the general level that they're in. Tired of saying I have X in my bracket, see if I can get there instead of just winning. Agreed. Do you ever enter the events you seed or help seed? I've been accused of bracket manipulation due to an oversight I accidentally made, even with a team of 4 making the same oversight. Um, Chance, that is a very good question. And I was gonna kind of cover like what my like later on in like this series, I guess, what my personal belief in entering brackets that I run is. Spoiler alert: I think that if you're running a PR level event, you should not enter. Um, like if you're the head tournament organizer of a PR level event, then you should not enter. Only because I think the bracket runs so much smoother. And that's more of a personal vindication I have. But if you have more people that you trust to run the bracket, then by all means. Um, uh, I've never been accused of bracket manipulation, thankfully. because I typically only enter weeklies, um, I jokingly get accused of bracket manipulation. Um, Helping seed, I typically look at the general placements of where they are, and I'm like maybe a little bit higher, maybe a little bit lower. But I've never been accused of that, thankfully. Um, and I've made oversights, personal oversights, but they've never been they've never been accused of bracket manipulation. It's just been that I've been fraudulent at that time and not and let regional conflicts happen effectively. Not caring if the person is taking it as a loss. Yeah, I agree. Um, but yeah, personally, I don't enter events that I see that I am head to yo of, and then sometimes I'll get asked for help seeding, which doesn't happen as often um, as I kind of wish it would, just so that way our players are seeded accurately. Um, the other thing is like, as I do not rig back throws, I've I've seeded some people to intentionally fight Chili before. I'll admit it. I've done that. I'm gonna try and never do that again because it's kind of petty of me. Um, but honestly, I'm not good enough to the point where like I can get far enough to be accused of bracket manipulation. Um, but yeah. Um, so that's not been something that I've been faced with. Um, and for majors, obviously, that's probably not going to happen because your TOs are not going to enter really. But weeklies and monthlies, um, frankly, who cares for weeklies? Um, but that's a personal thing. Um, anyway, so yeah. If you guys have any more questions, please feel free to ask. I'm gonna go put more ice in my water, and then I will be back, and I'm going to answer questions, and probably go ahead and end the recording there. Thank you guys for watching. Really appreciate it. It's been great.